Well, welcome everybody. Glad to see everybody here, especially on such a nice day. We got a big crowd here tonight, so welcome everybody. It's great to see so many people here. Well, let's get started with the dreaded announcements. Remember, the meeting's being recorded, so if you have any questions, please use the microphone in the center. I got it pointed around a different way, so when the visitors and the new people come up, that the camera can catch their faces. Another thing, I'm looking for pictures of work that people has done in the classes that we hold here. We're going to have a new piece on the website that's going to show all the members working and works in our classes. So if you have any of those pictures, if you could send them to me, I want to get that thing started. Next thing is for Home Sweet Home, we are out of wood. We don't know when. We'll be getting some soon, so Tom will come up and talk about that in a little bit. This year we're going to participate in the Moolah's Festival of Trees. And that's why next month we'll be meeting upstairs, because they will be setting up this room for the trees. It's a big auction. They're going to do all the work for us. All we have to do is supply woodworking stuff. So if anything that you have, you want to donate, that we can put it in there under our tree. They're setting up the tree, they're doing all of the lettering, they're doing everything for us. All we have to do is supply woodworking stuff.
How many items are they looking for?
They're looking for as many as we can get. There is usually a minimum of $500 piece, but because Dan has seen the work that we do, he's waiving it for us. So, that's good. That shows that, other people like what we do.
Okay.
So
Stuff to be sold?
they're gonna auction off the tree.
Tree and everything under
The tree and everything under it. Yep.
When do you need this stuff?
By next meeting. By next month.
And is your money going to the Moolah Shrine? Yes?
Money will be going to Moolah Shrine.
Very good.
That's auctioned.
Okay, thanks. Oh, good. We just got now 3 things for raffle. So if you have any questions or anything else, just go ahead and ask. It's the first year we're doing it. He trapped me last month after he saw some of our stuff, and he was more or less begging us to do it because he thought it would be good for us and them to show that they are more community involved. And on the forum, I know I post a lot of stuff that people send me. I need help doing this. I need help doing that. If you are going to pick up and call that person and do that job, can you please mark in that thing that you're taking it? I've had a couple people get back to me and thank me for somebody's work, and I have no idea who to thank because they really don't remember who did it, but they just knew we did it. So if you take it, you pick it up, just mark in there on that part of that forum that you picked it up and working on it. Oh, let's see. Next thing, it's not on the list, but because there's no meeting in December, Christmas toys will need to be turned in next month also, if you have any toys for the toy table. Now, new members and visitors. Do we have any new members here tonight?
I'm Tom Judkins. I was a member of the guild 15 years ago, and then I went and married his daughter and had 3 kids. So, been busy. But I like to do woodworking. I like to make furniture. I was in college for architecture, and I was thinking about going into furniture design, and then I realized that it paid like nothing. So I went to software instead, and it's worked out. So. Nice to be here.
All right. Welcome. Any other new members? How about visitors? I know we had a couple new visitors. Do you want to come up and come on up?
Hello, I'm Mark Latz. I just moved in to the St. Louis area from Seattle, and I did a little research and I heard about the Guild. I'm in sort of what I call a semi-retirement stage right now, and my wife wants me to get busy on things. I've worked around wood shops. I've been in the museum field, building cabinetry and so forth, but it's mostly I was more of a manager of these craftsmen that were in my shop. So I want to learn a little bit more and maybe learn some things from you. So I'm considering becoming a member. Thank you.
All right, welcome. Any other visitors? We have had 8 new members join since last month. So we just keep on growing, this is great. This is great, and it's all because of everybody out here in the audience and see all the work that we do. And okay, upcoming classes. First class coming up, which is the 1029, is sharpening class, which is full. Bill's teaching that one. 10.5, Bill's also teaching the lead jig, and there's 7 spots remaining. So if anybody wants to get in on that, there's plenty there. 12.4, I'm doing another beginning turning class, and that's full. And we're going to come up with another one after the first of the year because there seemed like there's a lot of interest in turning. So I'm going to get another turning class going after the first of the year. Now, upcoming events. Next month, we're going to be upstairs. I keep mentioning that so I remember. Brad Bernard is going to do shellac. Why not? Finishing with shellac. We have no meeting in December. But for coming up for next year, I want to call up Bob Ryan, and he'll come up and talk about what we got upcoming.
I am helping Bill out with part of his responsibilities. I'm going to be the guy booking events for our meetings. And I'm asking for ideas. It's not my club or any single person's club, but it's everybody's club, so I want everybody's input on this. So I know who to go out and get, and I'm also looking for members to help put on demonstrations up here as well. To give you an idea of who I've got so far, I've got January, February, and March booked up for next year. I've got, in January, I've got some people coming from the St. Charles Wood Carving Club, and they're going to be giving a demonstration on how to carve wood. Some very interesting stuff. In February, I've got a guy coming from, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the sawmill over in Grafton, but he's going to be coming out. And he's going to be, the owner of that mill is going to come here. He's going to explain the business of sawmilling to us and what's all involved with that. As I thought it'd be pretty interesting. Obviously can't bring the mill, but he'll bring pictures and everything else. And in March, I've got a member of the lathe turning, what is it, St. Louis Woodturners? St. Louis Woodturners?
Woodworkers of St. Louis.
Woodturners of St. Louis. Okay. Anyway, I've got a guy coming in to demonstrate, or not demonstrate. Obviously, we can't bring a lathe to the meeting. It's just too darn heavy, too impractical. So he's going to be talking about, he's going to be showing pictures and stuff like that and demonstrate the different tools and maybe some of the chucks that they use in the lathes and stuff like that. So those are some of the ideas that I had, but I want input from everybody else so that I can go out and book these people in advance. So I've got the first 3 months filled up, but we've got all the way up to next November to fill back up too. So that's all I got.
All right, thank you.
And if you guys want to take down my phone number, it's 636-233-1952, and it's Bob Ryan. So I'd be glad to take ideas from anybody who has them, and so I can start working on those.
All right. Thank you. Oh, Bill.
Let me comment.
Okay.
What Brian did not say is that there is a beginner's woodworking class in December. I don't have the date in front of me, but it's on the website. And that's going to be a prerequisite for novices to taking the fundamentals class. And there's going to be a new version of the fundamentals class coming up in January. I think I have a waiting list that includes 8, although I don't expect all 8 will wind up signing up in January. And the class will take up to 14 people. So if you're interested in fundamentals and want to get in before it's posted, send an email to me at vicepresident@slwg.org, and I'll get you on the list. Thanks.
Is that a prerequisite for using the shop then too, or not?
No, it's a prerequisite for the fundamentals class
Nothing to do with it.
for people who aren't familiar with running the big equipment.
Did you change the name of the fundamentals?
Well, I haven't
Oh, yeah,
posted
sorry.
it yet, so
Sorry.
you're getting ahead of me. You know. So it's not prerequisite for anything other than that class. In the last couple of classes, we've had 14 in each class, and let me say upwards toward a third of each class has been members who have little or no experience in our shop. And it takes a little while to get comfortable, running that table saw, running that big jointer. And this is going to be an opportunity for those beginners, true beginners, to get some experience, so when they get in the fundamentals class, they can hit the road running. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Bill. Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah. I've been busy getting that house ready. Oh, community outreach. Our toy drive this month has collected 215 toys, and we delivered 245 toys last month. It says this month, but actually it was last month. Wayne Humphreys is in charge of the Christmas toy program. Is it winding down? How many more weeks you got till Christmas?
Till the next meeting.
Till the next meeting, okay. They meet the first and third Fridays over at the shop.
We'll have toys on display at next month's meeting. You can see what we've been doing all year.
And then Home Sweet Home. We are out of the wood that we get. And Tom, want to come on up or come to the mic and give your talk? Where's the mic? In the middle.
Okay, the Fooder Crafters of America has been kind of dry on projects, so we don't have the scraps that we typically pick up from them. However, one of our members generously donated about 100 board feet of red oak, 5/4 rough sawn. Now it's in 10-foot lengths, so we'll be processing it next week down to more appropriate sizes for people to transport. And as soon as we're ready, I'll put a notice out, and maybe next Saturday, I'll load up the truck and we'll have a day for a wood pickup. Now, we are accepting tables any time, and I just want to point out 2 small tables up here, the round table, and I have 3 extra dining room leaves out of the large tables, and that's what the little dining table is made from. A leaf from a dining table. You're looking at me like, what are you talking about? But these are extra. They can't use them because they want the smaller furniture. So they take the leaves, and that becomes your top of your table. Just put a band around it and build some legs. So that's all I have.
All right.
Any questions from anybody? Anybody new to the guild that wants to talk about building tables? Just let me know. Thanks.
Oh, that table?
Should we take it out here?
Yeah, let's do that.
So we can give everybody a shot. This particular one, I used some hickory that I had left over or whatever, so. Anyway, that's the table, that's the table leaf. Be careful if you get it,
That's
and
nice.
just make sure there's no metal in it. At all. This is not a finished table. I just brought it because this is as far as I got. So I
What's gonna
don't,
happen next?
pardon me?
What are you gonna, what's not done?
Oh, gonna round the, we need to round the edges, soften the edges, clean it up, clean the glue off of it, and put a coat of
Put a
finish.
finish.
A stain and, I don't, probably shellac or whatever Jay says is the best, but out here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, show and tell. If you have an item up here on show and tell, if you want to come up here and get mic'd up, and we'll come up for show and tell.
Hello, I'm Dan Linder. I'm starting to build a bedroom set. I know you probably heard this before because I bought the lumber in March, and with my other commitments, it's slow. So this is one of 6 sample boards that I experimented with to do black veneer inlay with mother of pearl. And a panel similar to this will go on the, as an example, nightstand, the doors, and it's going to be a part of the bed. So each piece is, I'm going to try to have this theme throughout on the bedroom set. But what I have here is black veneer, like I said, the mother of pearl. So I made everything except for the mother of pearl dots, but the lines are made from 3 pieces of black veneer glued together. Then the dots is 1 piece of black veneer, and then of course the mother of pearl. But I used 4 different glues to help me in building this, and so it was quite a project because the veneer, as you know, is only 1/42 of an inch thick, and then I had to use both metric and imperial size router bits to have it all come together. So we'll see what the nightstand looks like next year. Thank you.
My topic was scrap. So a couple months ago, I had made a couple of the tables and I had the cutoffs and the bits and pieces left. And I did a salad bowl. Well, I had made some more tables and I had some more scrap. And did another one, a little more artistic in shape. So as a result of that, one of our members said, well, I've got some scrap you might be interested in. His scrap was these little pointy triangle pieces. So these two, the vase and the bowl, came from a bit of the white oak from the tables, the beauty ring in the middle here, and on this one is oak, and the rest of it is cherry that started out as pieces like this. I cut it down to 1/2-inch strips. When I cut these pieces down, that's how I wound up with the little sharp end pieces. And I got a plan for those too. You know, so we all have good wood at home, but we wind up, you know, I don't want to use the good piece. I want to, you know, kind of use up some of this other stuff. So that's how I wound up with this collection. Thank you.
So my first mallet was a sycamore branch that I made about 20 years ago, and I just shaved it off. So I had to make some more because that one finally flew apart. I brought a couple just because I thought they were kind of different species. So they call this white ebony. It's actually persimmon tree, and it's about as heavy as Osage orange. So it's kind of interesting, and I've never worked with it before, but it works really good. So if you come up here, just feel it, because it's really, really, really hard. And I've made about 3 of these mallets, and I've given them all away except for this one. But it's pretty heavy, and you can get it locally. It's the only ebony that grows in North America, which is kind of cool. And then this one's just another weird species. This is black locust, which, you know, is that tree that grows with all the long spines on it. And I made a chop of my vise out of this, and I just had a couple pieces laying around. And I just bought a lathe, and I wanted to make something. And I thought this would be a good hard wood, because this is about as hard as hickory. So this is just a little carving mallet, like 12 ounces or something like that. And then I wanted to make something a little heavier, so I made something a little bit heavier. And I just put I don't know where the camera is, but I put a piece of walnut in the center and just kind of made it fancy. So, just thought I'd bring it.
Now, as you see, it says Awesome Word, starring Wayne Humphreys, Jay Knopfsinger, and Bill Shucutt.
We're going to be talking about small shop considerations tonight. Just some things to think about. I don't know how big of a shop you've got, but small shop is, of course, in the head of whoever you are. I've got 225 square feet.
550.
And Jay's got,
Over 700.
yeah. So depends on how you define small shop.
Right. The
And
guild shop is about 1,000.
yeah, and some people have bigger ones than that. So we're going to talk about if one of the first things you need to do is decide what you're going to be building. Are you going to be building small things like this, breadboards? A lot of people do that type of thing. You're going to be building furniture. It's going to take a lot more room, a lot different equipment than if you're building breadboards. Toys, you can do toys in a pretty small area. Doesn't require really big equipment to do that. And if you got a really small area to work with, it's something to consider. Or if you're going to be doing cabinets, then you're going to have to get into a pretty big shop just to be able to handle the physical size of the sheets that you're going to be working with. So and what type of tools do you want to use? So hand tools, power hand tools, stationary power tools, and I guess that's it. All right.
Okay, I'm Jay Knopfsinger, and I told you, everybody laughed, but I have a shop. I don't remember being told that this was only talking about small shops, but I think a lot of the principles are really applicable. You just have to kind of modify it as per your what you have. Yeah, I started with a radial arm saw, I guess, was my first power tool, stationary power tool. I progressed to a shopsmith, and so I had the garage, and then I had the basement, you know, like a lot of you have then too. But ultimately, I built a addition to our house, and for the sole purpose of having my workshop. And so you will get a kind of a virtual tour, a little bit of my workshop to illustrate some of the points that we'll go over then too. It's not a small shop though. So you're just, let me just point it, okay. So first thing mentioned, and again, this is terribly important to be thinking about related to the size of your shop and what you have to deal with and so on. Access to and from the shop. When I had it in the basement, I'll tell you that I built two different things that I had trouble getting out of the basement to get to where they were going to end up going and so on. So you got to be thinking about what you're building and where it's going to go and whether you can move it or not. So that's my shop. So it looks like a two-car garage, and it's my shop. Okay, but it could be a garage then too. So one of the neat things is having such huge doors like that to be able to get in and out. So that access to the shop is not a problem if you have the ability to think ahead of time and you're actually building something that you want to your kind of your design and everything. That's not an issue. But you got to think about that of getting things in and out and moving around and so on. So there's a door open there you can kind of see into the shop. And so again, that access, there's a smaller door that goes out the back and everything. Okay. And are we going to do questions kind of at the end, the very end, or
No,
what
people have questions.
if they have? You can
Jump on them.
Okay, location of tools in the shop. I think all of you have been to the Faust shop, and I think everybody probably would agree that three tools that are probably get the most use out there are the table saw, the planer, and the joiner, right? So it kind of makes sense to have those in a location like they are out there, where they're relatively close together. And if you're building a piece of furniture of some kind, and you start with a block of wood that's not flat and not square or anything, what do? You make one side flat to begin with. That's your joiner. You may also turn it on edge and make one end flat, but also perpendicular to that flat side. And then you might take it to the table saw to cut it to the dimension that you want. And then you might take it to the planer to get down to the thickness that you want. So those three tools that's why they're the most used and so on. So it'd be kind of nice if they're kind of close together in the shop. So here is one view of inside my shop. And you can see my joiner here, my 20-inch planer there. This is an 8-inch joiner. And there's my table saw. So kind of a circle. They didn't allow me to have this 24 by 30-foot area not have a center post. So there's a center post, and so everything is kind of built around that. So again, that depends on what you have. If you got a shopsmith, I had a shopsmith. Mark Adams started with a shopsmith. So if that's what you have, then mobility is very important. If you have a smaller shop, to be able to move something from one place to the other, to be able to get the car back in and everything. I have the luxury of not having to move things too much, although I still have bottoms on almost all the big things that I can push them out of the way or push them to gain space if I need to then. Just some other, like lighting's going to come up ultimately, but this is a bank. There's two big banks of, right now, fluorescent lights. We'll talk about that in a second when we talk about lighting. There's a kind of a whole room ventilation, room kind of cleaner and so on. Just kind of pointing out some of the other things that you're kind of seeing in here, okay? So there's lighting, okay? So lighting, you can have incandescent. The trouble with incandescent, plain old light bulbs and so on, they burn out fairly quickly. They get hot and so on. They don't really produce as much light as you would certainly like. No question, lighting is very important in a shop. So the more light you can have, you can't have too much light, too much better lighting and so on. So then you have fluorescent. The shop, I think the shop used to have plain fluorescent lights, didn't they, until we got the upgrade. And then they didn't have LED. My shop is about 20 years old. I don't think LEDs were kind of in for something like the tubes and so on at that time. But they did have at least high intensity tubes that were smaller but more bright and so on, and so that's what my shop has. But now, no question, if I were doing one from scratch right now, and I'm ultimately going to replace all those with LED lights, so when one of those 4-foot fixtures of ballast goes out, it's gone away and being replaced with LED. So LED to me is the right way to go. And then you can have a light at each individual thing, or some of them that you think you need more light right where the blade comes and so on, okay? So there's an example of that. This is my small workbench for fine work and so on. So there's a light right over the top of that you can kind of adjust and move it wherever you want to. There's another one. There's my bandsaw that has a light pointed right where the blade is going to come through the wood and so on to really light it up. Electrical considerations. Everybody, you got 110, and you can't have too many outlets, it seems like, in a shop. Again, I don't care how big it is. So that's kind of important. So you spread them around where you need it and so on. Then 220. A lot of big tools. I don't know how many of ours at the shop, but maybe those three big ones probably for sure are 220. They're not 220? 220. Yeah, they're 220, yeah. And single phase, right? Yep. So you probably, if you're getting big tools, you're probably going to need 220 outlets then too. And then 3-phase. I don't know too many home workshops that are going to get into that, but maybe. 3-phase is a lot more complicated, but it's more efficient in the long run. But it's very expensive to put in. It's cheaper apparently in the long run. But you have to turn the thing on to begin with, the three-phase motor, and wait for a while before you can turn your tool on, or there's some kind of damage that happens and so on. Yes, sir. Dan, yeah, you know.
Variable frequency drives now for driving anything 1 horsepower or horse and a half, you get into those for about 150 or less.
No kidding. Great.
And the neat thing about that is, with three-phase, they do not have capacitors, so you're not going to be burning out capacitors. With the VFD, you can run it forward or backwards. You can control how fast it starts. You can control the braking. All that's in that little little magic box. It's 6 inches by 10 inches by 4 inches deep, basically.
Wow.
And
So if you want to think about three-phase, talk to Dan.
because there's a lot of saws and stuff got thrown away because people didn't want to mess with three-phase.
Exactly.
That's a whole new thing now to consider. A friend of mine's moving his shop this weekend out to the country, and almost everything in his shop is three-phase, and he lives right next to River de Pere in Hampton.
Mark Adams, he's got several of those around, and I know it's difficult to make sure they're turned on in the morning, and then how long you have to wait to you're disallowed to turn any machine on until it's been a certain amount of time and everything. And all of a sudden they have to, some expensive thing happens because somebody didn't follow the rules and so on. So talk to Dan about the newer, less expensive versions and so on of something like that. So, okay. So since I built this thing, I didn't build it, but I did a lot, but it was constructed. It has its own, is it 200 amp?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a regular 200 amp panel just for the addition. And, okay, there's a different picture of it. Okay. So this is, I told you I had to have this center pole. So on this center pole, this is a drum sander that's kind of thrown in the middle there too. But on this center pole, I threw in electrical. So there's two 220 outlets there and a 4 outlet 110 outlet. So a lot of the big tools and everything have access to 220 or 110. There's my little foot pedal that I can turn on the dust collection system and so on without having to bend over and stuff though. Okay. So dust collection, you can have permanent like we do at the Faust shop, and it can be either outside or inside. And if you have this kind of set up, you have a tube that goes to each tool, and all you have to do is open the gate and everything. And if you have it outside, you have the luxury of being able to have a big honker like we have at Faust, and not have it take up space in the shop.
Or noise.
Or the noise, right? You can also have a central unit, which is what I have, with gates to control opening up to just this tool, whatever, to have most of the suction power coming to one tool at a time. Then there are downdraft suction apparatuses that you just sit, and the suction is hooked up to this table, which has a bunch of holes in it, which sucks down. So if you're doing sanding and so on that, it automatically is pulling things, fine sand and so on down there. And then obviously you got a portable shop vac. So this is my unit, which is centrally located. It isn't outdoors, and I don't have individual tubes going everywhere. And that's just to mention the different things. So that's a big spindle sander, a big hollow core chisel, and it can go up to 1 inch square holes that I can make and so on. And that's the back side of the planer. Okay. Here's my octopus in the middle then. So each of these hoses goes to a different tool instead of having one hanging down from the ceiling going to each tool. So this is a gate. So that is open right now to this hose, which goes to the drum sander. But if I close that gate, I can open up one that goes to the planer. I could close that and I can have one that goes to the table saw. Or I can open this one up, which goes to that spindle sander. Sanding produces a lot of dust and everything, so one of the places where you need it. So that's my setup, okay? And then there's a shop vac. Look at the row of 110 outlets. They're just kind of all around the room and everything. And I forgot to mention with lighting, I have the luxury of having this be above ground, so I got windows all the way around. So I have natural light coming in during the day, okay? I have a downdraft table that's light enough to pick up and set it over on my outfeed table for the table saw and hook it up to a hose. And therefore, but it doesn't take up space in the meantime, okay? First aid station, not a bad idea to have there. And needs to be, if you're gonna have one, it ought to be readily available. And you need to have some kind of communication ability to be able to contact 911 or whatever. And then something with eyes and so on. You get some stain or something in your eyes, you might want to have an eye wash or something. So mine is in the hallway outside of the shop itself, just right outside there. Ventilation, you can have a whole room unit or a homemade unit. So I thought somebody had a slide of a homemade unit. I thought I saw that on one of the presentations. Okay, so there's this whole room ventilation system. Go backwards one. Okay, that's a different slide. Excuse me, go ahead. So that really does a reasonable job, but it really doesn't keep it clean while you're working there very well. But when I use it, because another slide is finishing, I don't have a finishing room, so I finish in the same room. But if I'm going to do a finishing on a project, you don't do it on the same day that you've been making sawdust. But at the end of the day, I might turn this sucker on, and overnight, it really does a pretty good job of cleaning the air and so on. So it's kind of nice to have that. Okay, heating and cooling. So ductless mini split unit, that's what I would do if I were doing it again. So that is kind of like the motels or hotels that have the thing sitting on the wall there, built in, air conditioning and heat, but ductless. It doesn't go to central air or anything like that. That's what I would do if I were doing it now. Then you could use central heat and air. That's what I have. You got to remember that if you do that in a place, especially like in a garage, it's forbidden to have a cool air return in a garage because of carbon monoxide you might be sucking into the whole house. And so I don't. I have central air and heat. I have its own thermostat in there. I can turn it to whatever I want to, but it doesn't have a cool air return. Okay, so that's in a shop that big. I think that's fine. The pressure buildup of you having stuff coming in without egressing is okay. The other problem with having the cool air return is taking all that dust that you just made and sending it into the whole house and stuff then too. How about a big fan? Big honker fans like that for cooling. That'd make you cool okay, but what's it going to do to the dust in the room? And if you have papers or anything loose or whatever, it gets kind of blown around, so not great. Gas unit for heat. I've seen some shops that have the up in the kind of ceiling thing that points, and they're pretty efficient. You might be a little bit worried about the fire hazard, especially if you're doing a finishing with lacquer or something like that, with having a flame. And the same with a wood-burning stove. So I've seen some people that actually have a wood-burning stove in their shop. So, okay. Lumber storage, you can have that within the shop, but it takes up a lot of space too. So I'd rather have it not in the shop. So I have most of my lumber storage in other areas. Like my shop has the same size attic or upstairs. So I have a lot of my wood stored up there. And I have some in the garage and some in the basement too. And so a separate area is better if space is available to be able to do that, okay? Tool mobility, we talked about. If you have a small shop, then tool mobility is incredibly important to have things on the bottom and so on, so you can actually transport something from one place to the other. So, finishing area, dust concerns. We talked a little bit about that already. I do not have a separate finishing area. Explosion concerns with spraying lacquer, and control of, if you're doing finishing, the rags that you use to put the stain on and so on can have spontaneous combustion if you just wad them up and put them on anything in the shop. So you need to have, they make these containers that are made for something like that. You can just throw them in there, and it's impossible for it to start, or if it does, it'll keep it in that one place. So what I do is I take my rag that I just used for stain and just open it completely up and just lay it flat on the floor. Or better yet, if it's summer, you can take it outdoors and do the same thing then. But something to consider. The last two slides, just another picture of a different place. That's my my bench. And some people would say in a shop, the best place if you're a hand tool person almost completely, that's going to be at the center of the shop, the workbench. So, but for me, all these other things are kind of around that center area then. And that's my router table. And I have a bathroom. There it is. So I have a little half bath. Go back. I guess I forgot to point it out. I got a TV that I can put a woodworking DVD in there to watch in the shop then too. So.
Do you have a vent in there?
A vent in there?
Do you have a vent in there?
I don't think I do. But it's got a little sink and so on, so, you know, for finishing and everything. So, all right. Any other questions?
What's your heating bill like when you don't have a cold air return?
I have zones. Okay, I don't ever have the heat turned on. In the winter, I turn the heat to 45 degrees. It'll only come on if it's less than 45 degrees. That's good for a lot of things, your tools, and good for paint and stuff like that. But if I'm in there, I don't turn it up to 70 in the wintertime, but I might turn it up to 55 or something like that. So it's only using heat and so on when I tell it to. And the rest of that addition, the master bedroom and so on, has a separate thermostat. So it's zoned. And same with cooling and so on. So I'm pretty happy with the bill not being extravagant because of that. I don't keep it turned to 70 degrees in the winter. Yes, sir.
You said you had 110 outlets all around, which is a great idea, but are you 15 amp or 20 amp, or do you take that into consideration at all?
They're probably mostly 20 amp. Just regular outlets and so on. Anything that you could just plug things in. And a lot of them stay plugged in, but they're rarely more than one thing is being used at one time. But I have multiple, you use whatever the electrical rules are about how many things you can put in one circuit. So I have that whole panel there. So I divide it up, and the lights are on a separate circuit. The big tools, of course, are 220.
I have one quick question now. Is it 6-inch tubes from your dust collector out, or is it 4-inch tubes?
I think the big ones are 6-inch. Some individual tools require it to be 4-inch or 3-inch. Right. So then you just have to get modifiers or whatever. So, Dan.
If you're wiring from scratch, I'd suggest you put in a couple of your outlets, put them in a 4x4 box, and put a switch on them. That way you don't have to be unplugging all the time. You can just throw that switch and you know that tool's off. Yeah. Plus, when you're testing stuff, I normally just use a little plug-in extension thing, and because it's got a breaker on it.
Right.
But the nice thing there is you got something that doesn't have a switch on it, just plug it into that wall, that outlet, and you got a switch.
So by code, all of my outlets have a ground fault. At the beginning of each one of the groups of things, groups of outlets and so on. So that's another protection.
If you have questions, please use the microphone. We can't pick it up going out to the web. So please use the microphone.
He's next.
Since Jay showed you a very nice shop I'm going to talk about 225 square feet down in the basement, in one corner, a 2x4 framed up wall with drywall and a man door for an entrance. But a couple of things on ventilation. I have no ventilation in that room, and it's a good thing because like Jay was saying, if you're blowing heat in there or air conditioning in there, you're blowing dust out, and you don't want that to have to be a problem. So I go down in the wintertime and it might be 60 degrees down in my shop, and by the time I do something and run some shop vacs to pick up sawdust or something, they act like room heaters, and so it gets up into the high 60s, which is more than enough for me. In my shop, I'm about 16 feet, something like that in this dimension, 14 feet in that dimension, and I've got it laid out so that I've got a vacuum cleaner that sits right here. That's my dust collection system for a scroll saw, and an oscillating sander and another small belt sander, which I can set on top of the oscillating sander. And all I do is move that hose from one piece of equipment to the other. And of course, you can only run one of those at a time, so that's plenty. And then you come on down, I got a drill press. I've got a larger vacuum cleaner that sits here, a router table that's on wheels right there, and a bandsaw right there. And over here I've got a workbench, and I've got a couple of tables over there with a belt sander on it. I want to go to the next one. One of the things when you got a small amount of space is how do you utilize it. And one of the things that I've learned is to utilize that door into that room right there. Normally my bandsaw sits inside the door and I feed stock through it that way. If I've got something longer that I want to run through there for whatever reason, I can just take and pull that bandsaw around and I can feed through the door into the shop, and then I've got plenty of room if I needed to feed 8 feet or more over to the other side. And the same thing, I've got a table saw that sits over here normally, a very small table saw, the bed on it's about like that. And if I need to, I can run it over, drag it over, and feed through the door. Otherwise, you'd be hard pressed to run anything 8 foot long through that little table saw and have enough room inside there. So think about your door. It's not only access, it's to feed stock in there, and that one certainly does limit what goes in and out of there. I've taken a different approach on dust collection because I don't have room for a dust collector. I don't want to set it outside in the basement. I can't put it outside the house. So I've cobbled up some dust collection that works pretty well for the most part. This is dust collection on a belt sander, and it's nothing more than a box fan left over from whenever we had box fans sitting around the house. I've got a filter, a pleated filter that's about 3 to 4 inches thick in there with a pretty high rating on it. And then I've got one of those cheap little blue filters, the kind you used to use in your furnace that you can read a newspaper through. And it's really pretty amazing how much dust you can collect with those. And you can see the dust on the blue filter. When I put it in there, I didn't figure it'd do anything, but it's doing quite a little bit. And they clean out real easy. That thing will last forever. Just blow it out, take it outside, tap it, whatever. But it releases real easy off of there. And I put a little ledge on the top right there to keep stuff from going over the top. And if I wanted to do a little better job on dust collection, I'd put a back there on the back side of the belt sander, and that would contain even more dust. But I've got some storage cabinets back there, and I'm not sure how practical it is. Dust collection on a drill press. I do a lot of sanding with a sanding mop, and so what I've got is this hooked up to a vacuum cleaner, just a flat magnet, straight piece of vacuum cleaner hose there, and a cobbled up fixture. Never found anything that was any good when you're drilling holes to collect that sawdust though. But that collects all the dust coming off of the sanding mop. You can see a couple of other ways on a drill press, some nice little fixtures there, and drill NATO. Let's go on. One of the other things, I put a very aggressive doormat at the entrance to my shop. So when I come out of the shop, I stomp my feet on that, wipe my feet off, and it's amazing how much stuff that collects. And anything it collects doesn't go anywhere else in the house. So it solves part of that problem. I've got a couple of different dust collectors. This is the big one, 16-gallon capacity, the large hose. I use this on the bandsaw and use this on the router table. I've got a 12-inch planer, and I can use that on a 12-inch planer also. If you're careful and make very thin cuts. You don't want to hog it all out. You'll clog up the hose and everything else. But you can run it on a 12-inch planer. And when you talk about electrical usage, I have to run that on a separate circuit than the planer, or they will blow a circuit breaker if the two of them are on the same thing. One of the other things, shop vacs like this tend to come with those stupid little paper filter things that clog up, nothing flat, pain in the rear. You can replace those with a cartridge type filter for somewhere in the neighborhood of $15. Cartridge type filters have a lot more surface area. They will collect a tremendous amount of dust, and you can still, even when you get a heavy cake on there, you'll still get good airflow. You just pull them out, go bang them on the outside somewhere, vacuum them off, brush them off, whatever, stick them back in there. The one I've got in there has been going for well more than a year now, and when you clean it out, everything gets good airflow again. Also got a small dust collector. Small hose on this thing works well on the scroll saw. Some of the other equipment. One of the keys again is it comes with a stupid little paper bag thing. I found some filters that go inside this thing. They set into here, wrap all the way around there. So you've turned this entire capacity right there into a giant filter. Next slide. It's a shop vac H type thing. They're not terribly expensive, and they run a long time. You can fill that filter all the way up without any noticeable decrease in airflow. And when you pull that filter out of there, you'll have 5 or 6 pounds of sawdust in there. So it's a good investment. Otherwise, you're trying to clean that little paper filter off on a continual basis.
I have a jet dust collector. It's a good size unit, about a horse and a half, I guess. You know, and I run the 4-inch hoses or 4-inch pipes on the ceiling. Okay, and that thing, oh gosh, it's 20 years old, and it came with canvas bags, and I went and upgraded it with that was like a 30 micron bag or something like that. I upgraded it to the 5 micron bag, which was plastic underneath and out on top, and that still was, but I did some research, and online there's a guy who was, I think he was an aeronautical engineer or something like that. He was really into airflow and stuff like that, and he designed a baffle that sits inside that dust collector. So like there's the ring, you got bag on top and a bag on bottom. Where the air comes in, that baffle sits just below the air intake into that spot. And it's called a Thene baffle. And all it is a disc that fits the entire inside, and then on for 240 degrees, it's got a 1-inch cutout. So around the outside edge is a 1-inch cutout. And when I fire that thing up, you can see a tornado in the bottom bag. And I mean, there's a window right next to that dust collector. And until I put that in, anytime you fired it up, you could see dust in the sunshine coming in, but now I don't. And so, and it's a piece of 3/4-inch plywood. So, yeah, THEIN or IEN, I don't know.
I went online looking and I found this dust stopper, DUSTSTOPPER. It's a cyclone type fitting that fits on top of a 5-gallon bucket, and you put that between your intake hose and your shop vac. And I tell you, I can fill that thing up halfway full, that 5-gallon bucket. I can open up my shop vac, and there's like maybe a dusting on the inside, and the filter, you know, hardly anything in it. And I've got 2 of those things, and they work great.
That's what the dust deputy.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
that cyclone.
Yeah, but I got mine at Home Depot for like, you know, $49.95 or something like that. If I was looking at them on Amazon, they were like $60, and I thought, same thing. You get the topper for the 5-gallon bucket, you get 2 90-degree elbows, and about a 5 or 6 foot hose that goes with it. So the only thing you got to really buy is the 5-gallon bucket, and you know, most shops I think got them around there anyway. But I tell you, I'm sold on those things.
And by the way, I can run my entire shop off of 3 120 volt circuits. They're all 20 amp. The only time I really need 2 of them is when run the planer and the big vacuum cleaner. Other than that, you know, lights and a scroll saw and small vacuum cleaner. And I get by with that without too much trouble. You learn to which ones not to run and where to plug different things in. And I'll second what Jay was talking about on LED lights. If you don't have LED lights in your shop, get them. There's no spring chickens in this room anymore, and they put out a lot more light, and you can see a whole lot better. So some of the considerations, some of the things you might want depending on the size of your shop.
Hey, Wayne.
Table saw.
Also, Harbor Freight's a great place for LED lighting because they have them on sale where you can get to 5,000 BTU looms for like $20. You can't beat those prices. I've
Okay.
got like 15 in my shop.
Okay. Yeah. Well, keep your eye open for them. We're coming up on Thanksgiving and the Christmas season. Probably a lot of places will have them on sale. Table saws. If you're looking for table saws, there's all kinds of choices out there. I've got a cheap little table saw I bought years ago for $99 because I thought all I'd ever want to do was whack down some 2x4s or something like that. And, it's honestly a piece of junk, but I live with it and I don't have room for anything bigger. The saw stop like we've got out in the shop takes up a lot of room. There's contractor saws. If you get Wood Magazine, just this latest issue's got an article in here on portable table saws. Anything from about $600 up to $1,500. So that might be something you'd want to consider. Band saws, anything from the big one we got out in the shop for resawing down to a table top model, in between floor mounted ones. I got a 12-inch floor mount band saw. 12-inch does everything that I needed to do, and if it doesn't, I can somehow work around it. So anyhow, it depends on how much space you've got, what you think you're going to be doing. If you set one onto the floor, it occupies a certain amount of space. If you get a tabletop one, it occupies about that same amount of space on the top of a table. So just figure out what you need there.
Yeah, he mentioned I got a small Grizzly. The Grizzly makes a really nice small bandsaw, and I got that about a year ago now, I guess, and it really does a great job. And then talking about space, I made a table. I guess it's probably three by 3 on the top. Okay, and I got the bandsaw, a vertical belt sander, and a horizontal belt sander with a disc on the end. And those are all on that same thing. And so when I need one, I just spin it around, you know, and that's it. And that small shop type, that's the kind of things you have to do. You know.
If you're looking for a lot of versatility and the ability to do a lot of different things in a very small shop, consider getting a scroll saw. You can make all kinds of toys. You can do intarsia. You can make darn near anything with a scroll saw. I shouldn't say that. It's not a lathe or anything else. But if you're careful, you can cut 1.5 inch thick wood, proper blade and proper speed, slow enough feed. So if you're just getting started and you don't know what you want to do, consider a scroll saw. DeWalt's kind of the a good unit at about $600, and you can go on up into a total. A Hegner over there starts at $1,200 or $1,400 and works on up. Joiners. Joiners are kind of interesting. We've got them out in the shop. Like we were talking, it's one of the most used pieces of equipment out there. Something great to have, except it occupies a lot of floor space. There are benchtop joiners that you can buy. Grizzly sells one, and they sell them with spiral heads on them, somewhere around the $400 range. And so I found those, and I'm seriously considering getting one because a lot of the stock I work with is pretty small, and it would be nice to have, except I'm not real sure where I put it, and then I got to convince my wife I need something else. So planers, anything 20 inch, 12 inch, different sizes. Think about those. Planers like this can go onto a stand and put wheels underneath it. I seriously can, recommend putting wheels under darn near anything. Make sure you got good quality wheels. Make sure you got locking wheels.
You can think about putting your jointer under your bench. I've got mine on wheels, and it slides under the bench.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of space in shops that sometimes are not utilized real well. Under the bench may be a good place. In the rafters up there, in between the floor joist and the floor up there. And, all you got to do is pick up any magazine, and it'll give you all kinds of storage hints. If you're going to look at a joiner or a planer, consider what type of heads are in there, whether it's spiral cut or a straight cut blade. We've got, I think, spirals in most everything in the shop now, and they're sweet. All you do, if you get a nick in one of these things, unscrew it, turn it 90 degrees, screw it back in. All your alignment's done for you. You got a new edge in there. It's really a neat way to go. Drill press, floor mount, bench mount. Again, depends on the space, what you're going to be doing. Very seldom are you going to need all of that height right there. But if you're going to be building furniture or something, you might need that. I've got a floor mount, and basically I put a vise down here, and it collects sawdust and junk down there. So for what that's worth. Grinders, low-speed grinders for sharpening tools, general purpose grinders. I find I don't use a general purpose grinder very much, but it is handy to have around, particularly if you still mow your own yard and you want to sharpen mower blades, or you get any number of weird things that'll happen. I grind off a lot of nails that didn't go in quite right sometimes. That won't come out any other way, so make them disappear. Lathes, if you're into that, floor mount lathes, benchtop lathes. I've told you everything I know about lathes, so we'll go on to the next one. Router tables, small ones that go on top of a bench. The only one I've had was a Sears Craftsman. It was small with a bad router and a bad experience with it. And I went over to Rockler when they had them on sale, bought a good router table on wheels again, bought a good quality router, and it's one of the best investments I've made. Because doing toys and stuff, I can lay them down on there, run them across the router bit, and it stays set up all the time and gets used several times a week at least. Sanders, all kinds of different belt sanders, oscillating sanders. Depends on what you're doing. Again, think about them. I bought one of these for one special application. Other than that, it's not worth a whole lot to me. An oscillating sander is a good thing to have. And think about whether you want to get one with a tilting table. There's been any number of times I wished I'd had one with a tilting table.
Okay, they talked about all the fun stuff. We certainly have a lot of new members in the guild who may not have a shop at all. I had one student in an earlier fundamentals class who didn't have a bench. If you're going to do much woodworking, you're going to want a bench with a vise on it. I know I argue with Tierney, who has a big bench, but he doesn't have a vise. In terms of hand tools, if you don't have power tools, you're going to need some sort of a saw. A traditional American saw, Japanese Ryoba, whatever they has coarse cut on one side and fine tooth on the other, and it's flexible. That's a pretty nice tool to have. If you don't have screwdrivers already, one of these screwdrivers that has multiple heads is awfully convenient, so you don't have to be running back and forth to pick one up off the bench. Bench chisels. If you're really into cabinet making, you're going to want a more extensive set than the 4 set, and you're going to probably pay more to get one with higher quality steel. The real difference between a really good chisel and a Lowe's version of a chisel, the steel's not as good. It'll get just as sharp, it just won't stay sharp as long. And if you're just getting into woodworking and you haven't figured out what you're going to do, it's probably a place where you can save some money and buy an inexpensive set, and then you find out later on, you know, that, gee, you want something better, and you can go buy, you know, an eight chisel set for $50 a chisel, you know, if you want to spend that kind of money. Mallets, there are a variety of mallets. I didn't show a carver's mallet, but any of them are good. What's really important for a new woodworker is to find one that feels comfortable in your hand. Of the hammer style that have the rubber ends, you want to make sure that at least one side of that has a pretty hard material. You don't want one that has too rubbery, soft kind of heads. Whatever you're going to do in woodworking, you're going to need some sort of a sharpening system. You could do oil stones, like a Norton that has a coarse and a fine. You can do the Scary Sharp system, which is glass plates, and you adhere varying degrees of sandpaper to them. You can get those with, you know, 20,000 kind of grit, and you can get anything just as sharp as anything else with a diamond stone, with a set of water stones. What we have in the shop is a Work Sharp, which is another sandpaper system. It's powered. I liked it so much I went out and bought one for my shop. Tormac, the Tormac 8 is an expensive machine. It's going to cost you like $800 to buy what you're looking at there, and then you're going to need some attachments and spend a lot of money. We have a Grizzly knockoff of that in the shop, but I've never seen it out of the cabinet. I've got a picture of a grinder here. Wayne showed both a regular grinder and a low-speed grinder. You can get things into the right angle with that, but you're not going to do any honing on that. You need some of this other system. As a beginner, there's some basic tools you need. You need some rulers. You need a combination square. You can get a nice two-set combination with a 12-inch and a 4 or 6-inch, which are awfully handy to use. You're certainly going to need extension ruler. If you're going to do any woodworking, you're going to need some sandpaper. You're going to want to have a sanding block. If you don't have a bench and you're starting from scratch, there are some variety of what's available commercially. Those are prices that I got last week. You're going to want a bench. You can get a 7-inch one. It's pretty economical. That's what I have on the front of my vise, or front vise of my bench. And I kick myself all the time for not having bought a quick release, but I get along just fine. You know, I can still turn that rat over and over. The quick release is the kind of vise that we have on the benches at the shop. This is a picture of a bench with 2 vices on it from our shop. Those are very sturdy benches, and you really want to have a sturdy bench. Those inexpensive ones that you can buy from commercially, I don't know how sturdy they are. But if you go try and shake one of the ones in our shop, it doesn't move. My shop has an 8-foot by 3-foot bench that has a front vise on it that I just described, and has a tail vise on it, and dog holes running up and down the length, so that I can put a long board on there and hand plane it. Before I bought a joiner, I bought a number 6 hand plane and joined boards by hand. After I bought a joiner, I don't use it as much. But if you're going to try and, if you're starting from scratch and want to build a bench, you certainly can do that. But you need to make it in a way so that it doesn't rack when you're pushing and planing on it. This is a detail that I found in a magazine. You can go to Rockler and buy a fancy deal there. It's 15 or 20 bucks to bolt it together. This is a 1/2-inch threaded rod. Cut a hole and even it out so you've got a flat side to tighten against. And then you wind up with a joint like that. That's just a 2x4, you know, and my 8-foot long bench basically doesn't rock, but I can tighten that guy up pretty tight so that it's sturdy. Yeah, you'll hear the proverb that you can't own enough clamps, okay? There are different style of F clamps. I counted up just because I was curious, and I've got over 50 F clamps in my shop. I've also got over 20 pipe clamps, different lengths. And I got, I didn't count them, but I got a bunch of C clamps, some of which I inherited. So inheriting things is a nice economical way to get started. If you don't have power tools or you don't want power tools, you're going to need a hand plane. This is a number 4. This is a little block plane. You can get heavily involved in planes if you're into that stuff. Wayne Watson had a couple of hundred before he broke up his set. If you're going to need to be cutting curves or doing dovetails, you're going to want a coping saw. You're going to need an awl. Comes in awfully handy to get a drill bit started right where you want it to start. a marking gauge, that's a wheel marking gauge that shows there. I didn't start using a marking gauge until about 2 years ago. I measured everything. But the beauty of this is you can get that set for the dimension that you want to maintain, and then you don't have the errors that come from measuring things multiple times. Depending on what kind of precision work you're trying to do, you may want a marking knife. I've never bought a marking knife. I cut things with an X-Acto. This has a flat on one side and bevels on the other. That may be a little bit easier to do really precision work, but the X-Acto works fine for me. A bevel gauge is something that you're going to want if you're going to do any kind of angled work. It enables you to copy that angle from one place to another. You certainly need it if you're going to do dovetails and don't want to buy a $35 jig from one of the guys on the internet. If you're basically a hand tool kind of person, there are a lot of power hand tools that you're going to want. Probably first and foremost is going to be a drill driver set that has both a drill and a driver with it. Something that you want to think about when you get started there is what brand do you want to be in that'll be with you for a long time, because you're not going to want to have 5 different brands of batteries that you're having to charge. And if you stick with one brand, you pretty much can swap them out from one tool to another. That may change a little bit over time, but router is something, if you don't have a router table, there are several different varieties of router that will benefit you. The trim router is a good place to start. It's small, about 1 1/4 horsepower, but for lots of work, it'll do what you need to get done. You can move up to something like a 1 3/4 horsepower. They vary a little bit by brand, but those are basically a fixed base router. I use that kind of router when I'm doing work on the lead dovetail jig. You don't want a plunge router for something like that. Depending on what kind of work you want, you may want to buy a router that has both a fixed base and a plunge base, which is a good way to go. There are other accessories like edge guides, and those work in most situations. If you don't have a table saw, a good place to start is either with a circular saw, or you can move up to a track saw. I was looking on the internet, the track saws have a pretty wide range of price. I saw some for under $100 that included some tracks with them, but there were some other ones that were like $900. And I'm not sure that I know the difference. I don't own a track saw, so I don't know. But I do have circular saws, actually. I have 2 or 3 of them. Sanders, there are a variety of palm sanders. You can get them with round heads that have both a 5-inch or a 6-inch. I have a couple of these Porter Cable with the angled heads that I like. I keep them hung up above my bench. I also have a little 1/4 sheet palm that can use regular rectangular sandpaper. And if you're just getting started, a belt sander is a tool that'll help flatten the board pretty darn quickly if you don't have a joiner, and it removes wood a lot faster than one of these other kind of orbital sanders. Well, you gotta develop some skills there, Bob. Tool storage. I have a couple of pegboards in mine. At this point, I guess it's more display than it is functional. One of them has that I use a lot. The one that's pictured here, that most of those tools I don't use on a regular basis. When I got started, I didn't have a bench, but I was able to lay my hands on some kitchen cabinets, base kitchen cabinets that, you know, came out with a remodel that I put a wooden top on that one. And this is another one that came out of that same kitchen that I put a bookcase above it, and that gives you pretty good storage. If you want something that has better drawers in it, then you're probably going to want a snap-on metal tool kind of cabinet that is pretty heavy duty and will take heavier things, and everything rolls in and out pretty nicely. Jay talked a little bit about wood storage in my shop. I just put some 2x4s up against the wall and built some brackets that go off of it, and have some pretty good loads on some of that stuff. Never had them come apart. That's another kitchen cabinet that I claimed and reused, and something that I have a couple of in my shop. If you have enough space, it is really handy to have a table that moves around, so you can be working on your bench and putting something back here. And when I'm building a bunch of toys, I put little boxes on that and put, you know, 20 different parts of this and 20 different parts of this in different boxes. I'm sure Bill Muth knows how that works.
Lots of boxes.
Lots of boxes.
Lots of boxes.
And actually, I put some shelves in underneath. I'm not showing, I didn't take a picture of the one that has the stuff from Tom Tierney, where it's the tapered white oak boards that I got from him. I still have some left. Those are actually all toy parts in those little coffee cans. That may be it. Oh, let's see. This is available if you go and look at this online. But if you want a printable copy of this, I can get you a copy of this. This is a list of tool sources, and if you're interested in it, just send me an email, send Vice President at slwg.org, that'll get to me, and I can hand you that. And then the next one is longer. This is hand tool makers. Next, 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 next. There are a bunch of those guys, but I have that list on a file and I can send it to you if you're interested in that. You don't have to buy everything at Harbor Freight or Home Depot or Rockler. That's it, guys. Questions?
There used to be a guy up on Creve Coeur Mill Road area that sharpened blades and all, and he's long gone. Where do you get blades sharpened or plane?
Well, Quinn does blade sharpening. Quinn Saw Company.
Where is that located?
They're in St. Anne, near the police station.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Near the airport.
They used to be in a suburb of Kansas City.
Okay, thank you.